this is where you guests will notice the biggest difference between what this club does and what a regular Toastmasters club does. So let us start with our audio evaluator, Vicky, and then move on to our visual evaluator, Ritva, then our content evaluator, Mike, and our manual evaluator, Mark. And if each of you would just pass it off to the next one, that would probably be the best way to go. So our audio evaluator for speaker number 1 is Vicky Chatterton.
Thank you, Lloyd. Vicky, in your introduction, it was explained to us what credibility you have and that we would want to listen to what you are presenting. And I really appreciate that. And then you started out in your presentation and you have a very pleasant voice to listen to over the virtual platform. It's very pleasant. It's very audible. And you enunciate so that we understand what you're saying. You're not mumbling. We understand everything. You were talked about viscerating evaluations, and I could just get that feeling from you. And I appreciate you also using the term secret sauce. That's kind of what we're talking about today. And so I really appreciated that portion of you taking into consideration your audience, the purpose, and weaving that in to that. One thing that you might want to facilitate a little bit more are verbal cues when you are presenting by the virtual platform is you can give your Zoom master or your audience visual clues. So when you were going to start sharing your screen, you could say, in a minute, I will be sharing my screen. And that way, if perhaps you didn't have a chance to communicate with the Zoom master that you need that privilege, they'll have time in order to do it. And so it becomes seamless. Verbal cues such as, I'm sharing my screen now, can everyone see it? And then somebody can say, yes, you'll get those verbal cues. And that's just one of those techniques that we use virtually. And I applaud you for tackling this forum virtual and just going for it. I know that it is a stretch, very pleasant to listen to. I enjoyed you telling us what you were going to be talking about and reading certain slides. That's one thing that I really try and get across on the virtual platform is if you have something up that you want somebody to be able to see or read it to them. There may be a reason why, and you did a great job at reading those slides to us. Then you talked about that ready position and you described it so well that I could see it. And I really appreciated that throughout your presentation as you would describe things so that I was able to have a mental picture. And while you were doing that, you have a speed that is very pleasant where you would give us a thought and you'd allow us time to think about it rather than rambling on to the next one and me going, wait a second, let me catch up. It was very easy to follow. And I really appreciated that in that. You talked about the whisper process, some I statements for feedback. You talked about universal feedback and specific feedback, and just gave me words for thought. And I truly appreciate that. Great job. I applaud you for using this platform for a presentation. And next we will have our visual evaluator, Ritva.
Thank you, Vicky. And especially you, Victoria. I enjoyed your presentation. Just as you know, I turned the volume off, so I didn't hear at all what you said. But according to your mannerism, you looked very sincere. You looked as if you were delivering information. Your eye contact with the audience was very intense. You were as if you were looking at each and every one of us, whether or not we got it. And I don't know if you repeated anything, but you were talking to the audience, and that was very clear. One thing that I especially enjoyed, your facial expressions. I don't know if you know this, but you have very expressive eyebrows. I was just fascinated by your eyebrows, and I'm wondering what you were saying there, but very expressive facial expressions. Also, your setting, your background is nice and mellow. Your demeanor and your outfit, and I love your earrings, very appropriate and enticing. Couple of things. The screen inside screen, that is a great idea. And I'm wondering, because we kind of lost half your face when you were looking down, or we lost half your face. Wonder if you could maybe sit back a little bit if you're going to use this type of screen on screen again, or just don't use it. And that way we would be able to see your whole face, even if you are looking down, glancing at your notes. The other one, and also because we couldn't see below your chin, we couldn't see your hand gestures, except at the end when you were talking about hand gestures, then you brought them up. But your screen kind of blocked all that. Also, I noticed that you were looking to the side quite a bit. I don't know if you have another screen that you use to run your PowerPoint. That was, and that's technology. Also, I noticed that you close your eyes when you're thinking about something and you want to remember everything that you want to say. So that was a tendency of yours. But overall, your facial expressions, your eye contact, your blue eyes, your sincerity that came through in your presentation, that was outstanding. Very well done. Now let me throw it back to Mike, content evaluator.
Thank you, Madam Evaluator, Mr. Toastmaster, all of our guests, especially you, Victoria Leuba. Welcome to the house. Wonderful to have you as your content evaluator. I was looking at your opening. I was wondering, what are you going to do with an opening once you cut a speech that's typically an hour down to 25 minutes? Wonderful that you began with that question. Made us wonder, okay, how can we enhance? How can we be more effective? How can we make our speeches excellent? That's what I was thinking in my mind. And then you dropped that excellent word, eviscerating. That was wonderful. Way to begin that. You told us that our evaluations can be less enhanced or even less inviting. And then we were wondering, well, how, in what ways? And then you stopped and paused and said, let's dig in. Let's dig in. I loved that. Segueing into the summary of your presentation. As the content evaluator, I'm only going to concentrate on the content, just the content of the presentation. You began with talking about a universal component. I talked about that. And then I thought, what is she going to go with this? And then you said, let's make sure that we check our intentions, because it's so important that we give quality feedback. When you jumped to quality feedback, it made me think about speeches that I have given in the past, and where maybe 8 out of 10 of them people said, well, it was a good speech. Thanks for giving it, but there was no feedback in how to improve. Or the ones that maybe were improvement, the improvement went like this. What I didn't like about the speech was, what I hated about the speech was, it's like, oh, wow. But other than that, it was a great speech. You just said what you hated about it. Now it was a great speech. It was very important to have that quality feedback. And I loved how you formulated that in. One of my sayings is ways to enhance this presentation, only because it's friendly, it's easy, and I love that you were talking about that. Manual objectives. Obviously, things are different when we do things virtually, as you suggested, and as you pointed out. Virtual evaluations, virtual speeches are different than when we do them live on a stage. I love the fact that you said, hey, things are gonna be different. That's the way it goes. You talked about Can't even read my own stinking writing. Maintaining the constructive criticism. Very true. The difference between feedback and advising. I love that whole section on the feedback. The I statements you said, you know, making sure that you are looking into the camera, because you kind of forget that there's a camera there, especially when you're looking at 15 faces on the screen and you're trying to make eye contact with everybody. It's not working. Just look into the stinking camera. That's all you have to do. I love that you pointed that out. That was wonderful. One of the areas, as you were talking about that, to enhance that presentation, and Ripa so eloquently pointed this out, was that since you were working with multi-screens and notes, I felt like I lost that connection. When you said keep that eye contact, I would have loved you just to zoom in right in on your eyeball and have it right there and said, this is what you do. Do it to enhance that. Wonderfully done. For the closing, you talked about our evaluation presentations not being content. So to evaluate a presentation and not the content, because that is a really important part of the aspect of speeches. As a content evaluator, it's a little different for me, but if you're a manual evaluator, stick with the manual evaluations. You don't have to talk about the grammarians and ahs and uhs because there's another evaluator to do that, especially in this club. As that, I really appreciated you pointing out. And then you ended with follow-ups. The follow-ups were great, especially the screen that had the idea. That was wonderful. It brought the opening back to the closing, and then it just put it together really well. Outside of the obvious hiccups of being a Zoom meeting, your presentation, as shortened as it was magnificently done. I really, really appreciate it. I hope it was very fruitful for everybody listening. On to Mark Johnson. Mark, manual evaluator.
Okay, I have to switch over to the screen for the manual evaluation. And the first question, you excelled at. Victoria, you excelled. What? I don't know what it's doing. I'm having a little technical difficulties myself.
They seem to be running wild today, Mark.
Yeah, they do. You excelled at showing us and giving us the way to present a very large topic in a condensed portion, and did it very well. I thought that you gave numerous great tips on how to implement the enhancements to a presentation, and I thought you did a fantastic job on that. The next one is, let's see, you might want to work on, I'm with Vicky, or not Vicky, Ritva, on taking the screen on screen out, because we could only see your face, and then once that way you couldn't get any gestures in. When you were talking about gestures, you had a problem about, well, it wasn't a problem, but you were looking at two screens, and if you have the whole screen open, then you could be back a little further, and then it wouldn't be so noticeable. Let's see, to challenge yourself. What I was thinking during the presentation was that you can, on Zoom, just do a meeting by yourself, and you can time it, do everything you want, and record it. And so then you would be able to see what you were doing in your presentation. You could see what things worked, what things didn't work, as far as gestures on Zoom, your eye contact on Zoom, which I really like the red tape on the camera. That was great. So just, I mean, it's a new platform. We have to learn how to enhance our presentation skills with it. You gave us lots of tips and tricks to do that. Thank you on that. Now I have to go back to the, whoops, next page. Okay, on clarity, I gave you a 4. There was some things, like I've said before, that the clarity was there, but it fell a little bit short because when you mentioned like gestures and so forth, we couldn't see any gestures. With the picture that we saw was pretty confined. So that is on that. Let's see, on vocal variety, I gave you a 5. You have lots of vocal variety. You are a pleasant person to listen to. Everything came through very clear and concise. I really like that about that. And then eye contact, I gave you a 3 because of the looking back and forth through the presentation at another screen and having a small screen area just made it more obvious. So if you pull back a little bit, then you can see both screens and wouldn't necessarily get caught too much as a diversion of looking at that screen versus your camera. Let's see, gestures, that's going to be a 2 because I couldn't see any gestures, and we know why that is. Audience awareness was a 5. You knew your audience, you knew what they needed or would help out as doing for future presentations with all the information that you gave to us. So that was great on that. And then interest level, we had a 5 on that because everybody in Toastmasters needs how to present. Plus in business, you need to learn how to present and be present as you do that. So you were interesting and everybody was interested in what you were, the presentation you were giving. It was well researched. You had the hour-long presentation that you smashed down into 25 minutes. And so overall, I thought it was great. There's just a few technical things for Zoom, and that's my evaluation. Thank you very much for that presentation, Vicki.
Thank you, Mark.
Yep.
Now we will have our evaluation panel, the same 4 evaluators, evaluate speaker number 2, Debra, and we will start with Vicki Chatterton, the audio evaluator.
Thank you, Debra. I so much enjoy listening to your speeches. You just have a tone about you that I could be listening to a radio and just envision everything that you're talking about. You just draw me in from the beginning with your intro. And then I liked when you said, I'm going to try. No, I am going to give you some tips. That you've corrected yourself. And I like that because we're not going to try here. We're going to do it. And you did that. You used one of my favorite words, plethora. And then you gave us an author with a book. And sometimes it's very difficult when we are talking about people's names, pronouncing them very well. Now, if you pronounced her name correctly or not, I would never know because you said it with authority. And that's what you have to do when you're saying somebody's name. Sometimes you just have to go for it. And I like that. You gave us a great tip. Then you talked about when you were at the conference and talking to the international speaker and how did he come up with his topics. And then he said, you have to lead an interesting life. And then I like that you embraced that and said, yes, I do lead an interesting life. And you embrace that and you were telling us about that. And then you're like, let's get real. And it's like, oh my goodness. Okay, this is just wonderful. We're going to get into it. And you just dove deeper and deeper. You talked about your master gardeners and the different aspects of that you've given speeches on. You also spoke about finding your purpose, your call to action. And then you got to the practice, which is always something that we need to be doing. And you were just telling us these wonderful tips, and then you wrapped it up with a bow by reiterating those for us one by one by one. And that gave us a excellent job at remembering what it was that you said. So if I had just listened to this, wasn't able to see you, I would have been so drawn in just to keep hearing about all these tidbits and tips that you were giving us and going to give us. And I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Rifa.
Thank you, Victoria. And thank you, Debra. The audio portion, I heard the introduction when Mark said, please put your happy hands together. And that kind of set the stage to what was to come. So I'm assuming this was more or less humorous speech. What I appreciated was that you stood up, and that allowed us to see your gestures, your hand gestures. And I specifically paid attention to your hands. I could tell at the beginning, you were talking about confusion or chaos, I'm assuming, because your hands were going a little bit faster. Then toward the end, they started to go more focused and more calmer. So you're talking about once you find, probably talking about finding your groove and finding your topic. So your hands implied that that's where you find your peaceful spot, and that's where the speeches come from. According to the audience, I also observed how the audience reacted to your speech, and many of the audience members were smiling or laughing. So your topic and also your mannerism, what's the word? Not cheek, mischievous. Your mannerism sometimes comes across as mischievous. And I can just see that you were talking about something that was kind of fun. And I noticed audience smiling about that. So, but overall, you came across as no nonsense. This is what you do. And your hand gestures kind of pointed that out. The only thing that, and this, it has really nothing to do with your presentation, it has to do with technology. Your camera, because you stood up a little bit further, it became a little fuzzier. And so I don't know if there's a setting to focus your camera, or maybe you just need to invest in a little bit higher quality camera that, instead of using the computer provided camera. So also maybe practice the positioning of the camera and how far you stand, because at points the tip of your head cut off. So you were standing right at the edge of the top of your screen. But overall, outstanding mannerism. I especially appreciated you standing up to present so that we were able to see your hand gestures. And I appreciate the variety of hand gestures and what they meant or implied in this case. So thank you, Debra. And now Mike and content evaluation.
Thank you, Madam Evaluator, Mr. Toastmaster, all the members of our group, especially our District Director, DTM, 2 times over, Debra Kroon. Debra, as your content evaluator, I was really just concentrating on your opening and your closing, those coming together, your summary. This speech started out phenomenally with your introduction. As Lloyd was reading that introduction, I almost thought he wrote it for you, because Lloyd, being one of the best competitive writers for speech contests around, I thought Debra took advantage of Lloyd and had him write this introduction. Then I realized as the humor was going through it, that Debra, you actually wrote this great introduction. It was true, it was fantastic, I loved it. I was excited for the presentation itself. Almost got me thinking that you wanted to compete this year, but knowing you can't, maybe you're going to sideline this presentation for next year's competition. The opening starting with, how do you decide? Another question. It worked wonderfully as you were walking around and engaging us and moving. Do you do this? Do you do that? Will they know if you've been properly prepared? How are you going to get by if you just faked a speech? No matter how good you are, they are going to know. And that was wonderful because I know I have done it, forgotten to do a speech or always have these pocket speeches. But pocket speeches are great, but if you haven't practiced them in months and you just pull it out, oh yeah, I'm going to do this speech, you still know you're not as prepared. It was wonderful on how you did that. Then talking about the conference in 2010 and meeting Keys, and then asking him, what do I do? How do you know what you're going to do? The segue into the summary worked perfectly as you thanked the Toastmaster, thanked everybody. We knew it was coming. As a competitor myself, I knew that was your segue into the summary. It worked wonderfully. Google equals gazillion ideas. I think you ought to trademark just that saying itself. That is true. You could go to Google, Bing, Yahoo, Face, Twit, whatever, all that stuff, and find that there's a zillion speech ideas. You pointed that out. How are we going to craft that? Starting with the topic. Do you lead an interesting life? We all lead interesting lives in one way or another. I find I've never met anyone I'm not fascinated about what they have done in their past, even with yourself. For a while, I thought, boy, Debra's just kind of been a normal girl growing up and blah, blah, blah. And then the next thing I know, you did a speech on seeing the Beatles and seeing Elvis and crawling over the crowd to touch one of them. I was like, wow, what in the world? I would love to have had a video of that moment. At that point, I knew that you had led an interesting life. It was wonderful. The stink bug story, I felt could have even enhanced more because the stink bug, I was like, come on. But it's true. Who's going to eat a stink bug? I mean, what predator in their right mind would kill a stink bug? This thing is as bad as the COVID if it got into all the vegetables and foods. And maybe, I don't know, maybe they're pretty tasty. Lloyd, maybe you can find out one day. The great example of that. And then you even went as far to tell us that when an average person speaks 720 words a minute. That is good information to know, especially when you're speech writing. Hone your speech. The summary worked very well together and it flowed excellently. Then you started getting into the closing, talking about the identify your purpose and knowing your researching the project. No matter what speech you're doing, you want to do a little bit of research. I remember Mark Johnson doing the speeches that he talked about over in Tule Lakes. Even though he lived there, you still want to do some research so that your audience knows about it. I felt that you introduced us to a great, wonderful Debra Kroon, who has got an interesting life and a lot of speeches in her pockets and who wants to compete in the future. Debra, excellent job enhancing a couple of the stories, would have fully culminated this presentation. Thank you very much for that. Mark Johnson, are you ready? Because you're up.
Writing down the times for Michael and everyone else. Let's see, reset, bingo. Okay, now I'm the manual evaluator for Debra's speech, and I will go over to the manual evaluation. You excelled at presenting this when you stood up. That was great. You could, I think standing up giving speeches, it brings us back to the kind of legacy way that we were doing it, and more people can connect when you're standing up giving a speech. That was great. You were concise on your purpose of your speech and what you were going to tell us in that speech. You might want to work on like the fuzziness of the camera, but that's no biggie. Maybe you could come out with more. This was a research project, so if you could come out with a little bit more research facts other than the book and stuff like that, maybe you could give like a quick blurb about the gardening society that you belong on, when it was founded or something like that, the I know that you talked about the beetle, which was good. If you could maybe enhance it a little bit with when it was first found in the United States, how much of a problem it has become since then, something like that to challenge yourself. Just keep on doing those things that were mentioned in the previous evaluations and keep standing up to do speeches. That's great. And also maybe just have a little bit of more research behind that. I have a tendency to over research and have a lot of paperwork with me. You didn't do that, which is good because you don't get confused with that. So keep on doing the thing you were doing and just enhance it just a tiny bit with a little bit more research. Oops, I went to the wrong screen. Ding, 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 ding. Okay, now we go to your, come on. Oh, let's see. Okay. Clarity. I gave you a 4 on the clarity. It was a clear description of what you were trying to put forth, that everyone has an interesting life and everybody can come up with a speech, which is paramount to get into the heads of new kinds or new members to Toastmasters. We need to make the process of finding speech information easier so that doesn't present a big problem to newer Toastmasters, and you did a good job of that. Vocal variety, you had great vocal variety. Eye contact was good because you were looking directly at the camera, standing up. Gestures, yes, you had gestures. I think you could have probably had bigger gestures, might have enhanced everything just a fair bit. Audience awareness, you did have the audience in the palm of your hand because everyone likes to figure out a way to come up with a speech when they don't know how they can. And you basically told them everybody has an interesting life and everybody can research parts of their lives so they can do a speech like this. And then comfort level, you were very comfortable in that. Interest, you were interested in your speech. You were interested in the construction of your speech to enhance that by talking about master gardeners and the Beatles and etc. Let's see. It was well researched. I give you on a 4 on that one because you could have enhanced it with a little bit more research. You had a little bit of time left over. Overall, I liked it. It was great. Thank you. And that's my evaluation. Thank you, Debra.
Thank you, Mark. Now we've reached the point in the meeting where we will hear from our general evaluator, Robert Salmond.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster and fellow Toastmasters. Very thoughtful evaluations today. And I'd like to call Mark. I know you've been talking a lot, but you're the timer. Could you give us a timer's report on the speakers and the evaluators?
Yep. This is going to take a while. Let's see. I have lots of notes that are in between my timing. Let's see. Victoria's speech was 25:41, which was just right what she wanted to do. Debra's was 6:20. Then we can go to the evaluations. Evaluations of Victoria Leuba. Vicky was 2 minutes. Ritva was 2:50. Mike was 4:30, and I was 5 minutes. And then we go on to Deborah's evaluation. Vicky was 2:11. Ritva was 3:06. Mike was 4:10, and I was 5:21. And that's my timers report.
Very good, thank you. Well, from that, we see that Mike and Mark might be over a little bit over on the time-wise, very lengthy evaluations. Now, overall, I thought the meeting was very nice, a good pace. It went almost an hour and 45 minutes, started on time, and we got a great attendance audience here. During the break, we had a good interaction time, and you guys were having fun, which is always a good sign. And you know, Mike has his hearts there, and Ritva has a, is that your library, Ritva? No, okay. Man, I'm saying, who could read all those books? Lloyd, I guess you did read all your books there. And Vicky Leuba, I do like that. I did like the window in window, the frame. I thought that was cool. Kaylin, you got the snow. Hope you're warm. And the humor you had, Janet, on your background, thanks for that. That really adds to the meeting when we have that variety and we can look around. And Mark, he's always changing his, and so is Mike. The speeches were great. And you know, the nuggets that come out from senior speakers like Vicky Leuba and Debra Kroon is just fantastic. It's true, you really have to listen. Now, there were some stumblings and perhaps some preparation that were pointed out in the good evaluations, but check your intentions. That is so important when you're doing an evaluation. So what is your intention? If you're always doing that, and then the idea of the idea, IDAA, just really good. And Debra, your message of everybody has an interesting life, that's very important. We all have something to say, and sometimes I get quite often told that I say too much. I have some competition though, and for the evaluators, I did a lot. I have 10 pages here. I'm not going to talk a whole lot, but there were a lot of good things. And also the Toastmaster, Lloyd. You know, Lloyd, you are a professional speaker. As soon as you start speaking, I am envious because of the way you can talk, and you've been talking all your life as a teacher. So you have that advantage, and it's a wonderful skill to have. Some things that I would like to see you do is you also have shown in the past that you're a really funny guy. You have a tremendous sense of humor, and you can use that skill you have in writing to convey that humor very tersely. So I would have liked to have seen some of that today. And also when you're doing the introductions, the first one for Vicky Leuba was very lengthy, and it felt like you were reading it. So perhaps it was passed to you late and you had to read it, in which case one of Vicky's teachings that, you know, you have to deal with what you got. But if you could get it in advance and just read through it once, so that when you are presenting it, it sounds like it's, you know, and maybe slow down on the introductions, so that it comes across as not being read. But you're such a professional speaker. And one more suggestion. This is, again, these are just what I see. When you exit a speaker like Vicky or like Debra, there's all kinds of nuggets in there. And when you pass to the timer to give us time for evaluations, perhaps just make one little anecdotal Lloydism in there. Weave your natural sense of humor, and there were so many nuggets in Debra's and Vicky's things that you could have, I know that you could have done it. And probably you'll wake up and say, man, I wish I'd said that. But, you know, take one little idea out of what they say that is personal and funny for you. And that really helps the flow, and it shows engagement with the speaker. So on the evaluators, we had the first evaluator for Vicky. Vicky, you did a very good job in both cases. You're very methodical, you're very professional, you're very encouraging to the speaker, and you're adding the skill that you obviously have. So, yeah, you had evaluation speaker. Okay, so for Lloyd, speaker 1, evaluator 2, yeah, you did. You were just very, very good on the audio content, and Ritva, you were on the visual. You were also very focused by not listening and just looking, and that gave us an interesting perspective, because you obviously saw some things that you had to make assumptions on, and the words that you used, you looked very sincere. You were very intense. Your facial expressions, and it was quite a bit of a surprise when you pointed out Debra's eyebrows, for example, are very expressive. The demeanor and the earrings are enticing. So you use a lot of things, and you gave a lot of nuggets as well. You had 4 that I wrote down. And I'm actually, this is Ritva, sorry. This is Ritva on, yeah, that's Vicky. I got too many pages here. So Vicky on Vicky, you had some good things too, and you used the word quite a bit, a term called really appreciate. So that's the one thing that I would suggest, is that you maybe try and remove the word really and just say appreciate, because you're saying really appreciate, and then at one point you had said it 4 or 5 times and you changed it to truly appreciate. Okay, 5, Ripa, and 5, 6. And then Mike, you as usual are very animated and very entertaining. You use the term, I love the fact. Use that 6 times. And I really appreciate, and again, you're using the word really a lot. So perhaps just say I appreciate and pull out the filler words. You use the word, today you like to use the word stinking and stink. So you used it twice in Vicky's, and also used it twice in a different sense, stink, in Debra's. So that word got stuck in your brain today, but you really brought it together, and the only thing I could suggest is that you take out some filler words. And then Mark, you go at a really nice pace for me to follow in terms of what you were doing, and you were very methodical in using the manual, which is kind of an advantage. And you pointed out in Vicky's speech that it was a challenge for the technical part, and you suggested that she practice it by herself. And then giving the ratings for everyone, I thought was very good, and then sharing the reason why. So in short, I think it was a very, very knowledgeable meeting. There's a lot of nuggets here to derive. It was very entertaining, very visual, very audio. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Lloyd.
Thank you very much, Robert. I think for you guests, you've seen the essential difference between this club and an ordinary club well, two of them really. One of them is that we don't have some of the elements that the other clubs have, like table topics and whatnot, but we do have much, much more in-depth evaluations. And that is the secret sauce of this group that Vicki referred to earlier. Since we're running a bit late, I will turn the meeting back over to Mark to wrap things up.
Thank you very much, Lloyd. Does anyone have any comments or questions before we wrap this up? Just go ahead and speak up if you do.
I do, Mark. I just wanted to let everybody know I appreciate you being here. This is one of our mini sessions. If you're thinking, oh my gosh, I haven't gotten all of them, there are some more coming out. Next Saturday, we will be having a mini session about pathways for your club officers who haven't gotten trained specifically. We will be having one during the lunch hour, and I will post that. And then we also have the 27th is another makeup, what have you, of the club officers training that Division D is putting on, and that's the 27th. All of these will be on the district calendar. District D's already on there. The two other mini sessions will be posted later this afternoon. And thank you all for coming today. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Mark?
Dora, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mark.
Yes.
And our guests today, thank you so much for coming. We have 13 guests, including our keynote speaker, Victoria Leuba. I would like to invite all of you to join our Audible Experience Toastmasters. We usually meet every second Saturday of the month. So every second Saturday of the month, we usually run from 10 o'clock till 11:45. So this is running a little longer. And so yes, we would absolutely love to have you join our club. And I will be emailing each and every one of you to see if you would be willing. And this is a great opportunity if you have your home club and you're doing a lot of speeches there, you could do some here so that they don't get tired of looking at you. Just kidding. But this is a great way to not be overexposed to your home club and always speaking. So we welcome you to join us, and I will be emailing all of you. So think about it. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Ritva. And I would like to extend that invitation once again. We have the ability and Audible Experience also to do longer speeches. When it was first developed, in the old manuals, you had the legacy manuals, you had like keynote presentations that were 45 minutes long, and you couldn't really do that in a regular Toastmasters meeting, but you could do that in Audible. So if you have longer speeches, complicated speeches you want to get evaluated on, or you're going to do a presentation for your work or for some organization that you are affiliated with, come join us, because you will enhance everything that you do by coming to Audible. Anyone else?
Mark, one more thing to
Yes.
what I was saying for everyone to join. Because we are advanced Toastmasters Club, the only prerequisite is that you have completed level 2, or the old way of doing things, the first manual, competent communicator. Back to you, Mark.
Yep. Thank you very much for that. Anyone else? Debra, do you have anything to add?
Thank you. Hi, I have something.
Oh, okay.
Hi.
Excuse me.
I just wanted to express appreciation. I will express appreciation to this format of training. I am very much a visual learner, and seeing what you're trying to convey to me as a club officer, seeing that in action is how I can learn. I learn much better that way than someone just talking at me. So I very much, thank you so much for showing us how you accomplish these things. I think it will equip me to better serve my club, and thank you.
Wow,
Colleen.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kat, did you have your hand up?
I was just applauding that I prefer this way of the training as well. I think it was much better than like last week's training where it was more discussion based. I really like the show and tell and how put together the whole club is. I know that there is some mishaps with Zoom, but overall it was very inviting and I really appreciate the level of detail that I saw today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Debbie Ford has her hand up.
Hey, Deborah, or Debbie, excuse me.
That's all right. Thank you. I'm practicing with the hand raise. I'm going to try to get my my club and my Rotary Club to do that. But I just kind of getting back to a comment that was made earlier in our meeting. I really appreciated the mention made of evaluation and how it dovetails with mentorship, and the interaction with a speaker before a meeting, during a meeting, and then the follow-up piece, and how evaluators and mentors can collaborate. I just, our club is really trying hard to get our mentorship program up and going and sort of seamless. It's always a little rocky to do that, but I love that concept of integrating evaluation and mentorship. That's really powerful. So thank you for that.
Thank you. We learn for all comments. And Deborah?
No, I'm just applauding.
Yay.
I have a comment to make.
Okay, Janet.
I would say I liked both speeches. They were very good and very informative. I was taking notes as I was listening. Deborah, I tell you something. I hate preparing for speeches. I really do. I hate research. Well, I don't mind researching. I just hate practicing them. That's my biggest downfall. Because you guys can tell when I give a speech, you go, she did not prepare. So, but yeah, I really appreciate both your speech, and I appreciate yours too, Victoria. It's very, very informative. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you. Elaine has her hand up.
Elaine.
I am so glad we're in a Zoom meeting right now, so you guys can't throw shoes at me for what I'm about to say.
Uh-oh.
So like the meeting was great. I mean, everyone did a wonderful job. It looks like a great club to be a part of. But I found myself confused at what the whole meeting was about, because I came to it thinking it was a training session where I was going to be learning club secret sauce. And so later on, it's like we were having a meeting and not a training. So I found it confusing. Like, what am I supposed to be taking away from this? What's the secret sauce?
Okay.
That's a very good point. It's something, as the general evaluator, I had written down and forgotten to mention, but in the agenda, we should have stated what the purpose of the meeting was, secret sauce, or the theme of the meeting.
Right. I thought that when I gave my introduction, I kind of explained that each club has their own secret sauce, and that with this club, it is the evaluations. And while we went through this meeting to focus on your club and what you might pull out of your club as your secret sauce.
And the enhanced evaluations that you could integrate into your club and help your evaluators do better evaluations. Anyone else? Deborah, do you have anything for the good of the order?
I have one more thing.
Oh,
And I'm feeling defensive about it, which is one of the things that happens when you get an evaluation. You get a little defensive about stuff. So I'm trying to get that under control. But I did practice this with the second screen, with the slides. And the problem is that when you share screen, you can't see what's happening unless you have a partner. So you have to practice it with a friend, which I did not do, which would have solved some of those technical difficulties. And I appreciate Debra extraordinarily because she called out the fact that it wasn't working the way I thought it was working, because you can't tell that unless somebody tells you. So the practice thing is right, but if you're going to practice using that kind of technology, you might want to say, can you do this with me? And tell me where I'm fouling out so you can fix it before you get on stage, as it were. But you can't see that if you do it by yourself. But practicing with and recording with your own Zoom makes a lot of sense. It really is very, very helpful.
Thank you very much for that observation, Victoria. Anyone else? I guess Debra doesn't want to talk.
Let's say goodbye.
Let's say goodbye. It's noon. It's time for lunch. So,
Bye.
adios.